بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. So last week we just done a quick introduction of this kitab regarding the great scholars from Deoband. So inshallah today we'll start to discuss some stories and incidents from the life of Shaykh al-Hind, Maulana Mahmud al-Hasan rahmatullah alayh. A quick introduction. Maulana Mahmud al-Hasan rahmatullah alayh is famously known as Shaykh al-Hind. He was the first student of Darul Deoband. And Darul Deoband was established in 1867 or 1283 in the Hijri calendar. He was one of the greatest students and also one of the greatest teachers in the history of Darul Deoband. And he was also later appointed as Sadr Mudarris, like the Dean of Scholars and the patron and the Sarparas of Darul. And when he came to Tasawwuf, he had received ijazah from Haji Imdadullah Muhajir Makki rahmatullah alayh, and then later from Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi rahmatullah alayh. And he passed away in 1920, 1339 Hijri. And he left behind students like Maulana Ashraf Ali Tahir rahmatullah alayh, great scholars that Allama Anwar Shah Kashmir rahmatullah alayh, Allama Shabir Ahmad Uthmani, Maulana Hussein Ahmad Madani, and Maulana Ubaidullah Sindhi rahimahumullah. So very great scholars. The special standing of Shaykh al-Hind, Maulana Mahmud Hasan rahmatullah alayh, places him at the forefront of Mufti Muhammad Shafi's mentors. So he was at the forefront of the mentors of Mufti Muhammad Shafi rahmatullah alayh. In his travel of Safarnama, when Mufti Shafi rahmatullah alayh traveled to Deoband and Thana Bhawan, so Mufti Sahib, in this he describes his relationship with Shaykh al-Hind rahmatullah alayh. He says that I had the privilege of being a student in his day. So he was a student and Shaykh al-Hind was a great teacher, Shaykh al-Hadith. He says that, however, I was not formally or technically his student. Rather, I was a student of a secondary class at that time. So meaning he was from a lower class. And Shaykh al-Hind was teaching the higher classes. But he says, yet prompted by my admiration and respect for him, I often attended his lectures of Sahih Bukhari. And he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also bestowed upon me the privilege of reading Taraweeh Salah for 2 years behind him, before Shaykh al-Hind was imprisoned in Malta. He was put in prison in Malta. And he says, after he had come back from Malta, he says, I pledged my bay'ah and allegiance to him. During the time, he says, when Shaykh Mufti Shafi rahmatullah alayh, at that time, when Shaykh al-Hind came back from Malta, from imprisonment, now he was a junior teacher. So before he was a student in a very low secondary class, and then during the period that he was in prison, he graduated and also became one of the junior teachers. And then he says, upon visiting his grave after he had passed away, he says, I was reminded of his affection and favors upon me. So from this snapshot, you can see what great ta'alluq and connection he had with Shaykh al-Hind rahmatullah alayh. He says, although he was not Shaykh al-Hind student in a formal sense, but rather whenever he used to get a chance, he used to go and attend the lectures of Sahih Bukhari. And he says the fact that he was able to recount in detail, Mufti Sahib would in detail mention to his students and the followers many of the different various points which Shaykh al-Hind rahmatullah alayh covered in those lectures. This showed that he wasn't just that he was attending some lectures here and there, but rather he had made it a routine जिंदगी का हिस्सा बना दिया था उन्होंने, that he used to continuously and routinely attend Shaykh al-Hind's lectures. And he says in the evenings, when other students, they used to go and relax. So in the Bukhari students, they always used to have class in the evenings as well. So he says, instead of me going to relax, I used to go and attend the lectures of Shaykh al-Hind, rahmatullah alayh, until the Maghrib prayer. And then he says, after war had broken out in Tripoli and in the Balkans, he says, Sheikh al-Hind then declared that there would be long holidays from Darul Deoband. Now, the teachers at that time, they began to raise money and funds for these causes, which were seen to be very beneficial at that time. And then he says, under Sheikh's directive, so Mufti Shafi Rahmatullah, he also began to collect donations going from one village to the other. And he says it was in this period of his time, okay, that he recounts all these stories and from Sheikh's gatherings and from all his lectures. Now, Mufti Sahib Rahmatullah, he mentioned some of the stories he heard from his father. He says, the leftover wudu water. So when we finish wudu, there was some water left over because at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would do wudu from a utensil rather than the taps that we have at this time. So it says in almost all of the ahadith collections that after completing wudu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to drink the leftover water from the container. तो जो भी बाकी शुदा पानी था, आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम उसको पी लेते थे. And it has also been reported that he used to sprinkle some of the water on his lower garment. तो कुछ पानी अपने नीचे के पजामे पर, लुंगी पर छिड़क लेते थे. Now the ulama, they have offered different interpretations of why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what was the wisdom behind him drinking the leftover water and also sprinkling some of the water on his lower garments. So Mufti Muhammad Shafi Rahmatullah alayhi, he says that Shaykh al-Hind's explanation regarding why, regarding the wisdom behind these two actions was the most insightful one. So फरमाते कि according to his view, wudu is an action for ensuring the cleanliness and purity of the bodily parts. तो wudu से हमारा बदन साफ और पाक होता है. Yet, while it is important to purify the outward, बाहर का हिस्सा भी साफ करना, the same way it is even more important to purify the inward as well. So after completing wudu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would drink and sprinkle the water because both of these are connected to the matter of the inner purity. तो वुजू का पानी पी जाना और छिड़कना ये अंदरूनी की सफाई से ताल्लुक रखता है. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would drink the water. And the connection is that the two body parts involved here, pina is with the tongue, that you drink with the tongue, and the private parts which he used to sprinkle. So he goes, these two parts, they are the very foundation of humanity's most negative traits and wrongdoings. So असल जड़ है गुनाह का. जबान से कितने गुनाह करते हैं, शर्मगाह से कितने गुनाह होते हैं हमसे, ठीक है. So these two are the foundations of the wrongdoings when it comes to us as human beings. So he says in hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, he who guarantees that he will protect the two, he says, what lies between the jaws, meaning the tongue, and what lies between the legs, meaning the private parts. So whoever he protects these two things, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I will assure him of entry into Jannah. तो जिसने जो भी जबान की हिफाजत की और जो अपनी शर्मगाह की हिफाजत की, असल में फरमाते हैं कि मैं उसे जन्नत की गारंटी देता हूँ. Because these are the most, basic of what we need to control. So hence he says, the purpose of drinking the leftover water from wudu and sprinkling some on one's lower garments is to focus the attention on the importance of protecting against these two sources of human deficiency. तो इनसे हिफाजत के मुतालिक हमें गौर व फिक्र कराने के लिए आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ये अमल करते थे, ताकि अंदरूनी का भी इतना ही जरूरी है सफाई जितना हम बाहर की सफाई का एहतिमाम करते हैं. The second incident, fasting on the day of doubt, यौम शक, जो शाबान रमज़ान से पहले जो आखिरी दिन होता है, the last day before Ramadan starts, so it's a day of doubt whether the moon was seen or not. So in this instance we should not fast. So that's why it's called Yawm Shak, the day of doubt. Now if the moon is not sighted on the 29th day of Sha'ban, then the 30th day of Sha'ban, the 30th day, according to ulama, is referred to as the day of doubt. And the Hanafi ulama are of the view that it is makruh for the general public, awam ke liye makruh hai, to fast on that day. However, he says, ulama in Ahnaf, ulama can observe a fast on this day with the sole intention to carry out an act of nafl. Nafli तौर पर यौम शक 30th शाबान उसके दिन रोजा रख सकते हैं. Why? Because the ulama are clear that it is not being done out of prudence or uncertainty in relation to the start of the blessed month of Ramadan. So it's not एहतियातन वो रोजा नहीं रख रहे, मगर वो इस तरह रख रहे कि वो एक नफल है और उनको मालूम है कि रमजान का महीना शुरू नहीं हुआ. But for awam, they should not fast. Why? Because the awam, they might end up fasting it because as a precautionary measure. What if Ramadan had started? Understand? So farak, that's why we should not fast. So Mufti Shafi Sahib rahmatullah alayhi related that once on the day of doubt, Shaykh al-Hind rahmatullah alayhi, he came out and he was chewing some pan. And which meant he was not fasting. Pan khaye to roza nahi rakh rahe. So therefore someone from the gathering, they asked, Hazrat, today is a day of doubt, but is this not the case that the select few, meaning the ulama, they're allowed to fast? So asking him, how come you're not fasting? You are from the ulama, the khawas. So why not fasting? So at first he replied that this concession is only for a select few. So how can I be confident of being included from those select few? वो तो खवास के लिए है, मुझे क्या मालूम कि मैं उन खवास में से हूँ या नहीं. तो ये उनका तवाज़ो. But then afterwards he says, in fact, I am terrified of the hadith of Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu, that one who fasts on the day of shak, day of doubt, then truly he has disobeyed Abul Qasim, meaning he has disobeyed Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So although the Ahnaf apply this hadith to the common people, they exempt the ulama and the khawas from it. However, a literal reading of the hadith suggests that the ruling is a general one, in which case that Shaykh was clearly reluctant to override the apparent meaning of the hadith. One more story, inshallah, we'll finish. Very interesting. Umar radiallahu anhu and Shaitan. Once someone asked Shaykh alayhi about the hadith, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that Shaitan does not pass the road by which is used by Umar radiallahu anhu. कि जहां उमर जिस रास्ते से जाते हैं वहां शैतान गुजरता ही नहीं. So he says, because the same or similar was not said regarding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, then the question naturally arises that why did shaitan, why shaitan should have feared Umar radiallahu anhu alone more, even though both the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, both of them, they enjoyed a higher status. Okay. आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम और अबू बकर अन्हु का मर्तबा ज्यादा ऊंचा था, तो क्यों उनके बारे में कुछ नहीं कहा गया, मगर उमर के बारे में कहा गया कि जब शैतान जहां से गुजरता है वो उस रास्ते पर नहीं जाता. So now Mufti Sahib, he says that in responding to any kind of critical question, then Shaykh rahmatullah alayhi, he would usually start with a humorous remark. तो कोई भी इस तरह कोई सवाल करता, तेरा सवाल या इस तरह क्रिटिकल कोई सवाल करता, तो फिर वो पहले हंसी मजाक करते, एक जोक मार देते. So he would always give a humorous remark before he would provide a proper comprehensive reply. Hence, it came as no surprise that in answer to the question, he said that it is shaitan's own stupidity. Shaitan ki bewakoofi hai ki wo aisa nahi kar raha. That I think you had better ask him, ask shaitan, why he feared Umar radiallahu anhu more then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. शैतान से ही पूछ ले, वो क्यों डर रहे हैं? तो why asking me? Ask शैतान. वो बताने के लिए कि सवाल भी कोई काम का सवाल नहीं है, मगर खैर तो फिर वो जवाब. And then he gently proceeded to offer the explanation. He says, superiority and awe are two different things. ओ जो खौफ करते हैं किसी से उनके मर्तबे के एतबार से, और किसी का अफजल होना, ये दो अलग चीजें हैं. फजीलत और खौफ, यानी वो अदब जो कहते हैं, वो दो अलग चीजें हैं. A superior person may not necessarily be the most dreaded person. जो अफजल शख्स होता है जरूर नहीं कि सब उससे खौफ करते हो. So if a person is more superior, it's not a must everybody must fear him or be scared of him or dread him. In the case of Umar radiallahu anhu, the quality of awe was a predominant characteristic. तो उमर रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु के अंदर क्या था? खौफ ज्यादा था. People used to fear him more. There was more awe. And in the presence, and his presence was what the hearts of the people felt most immediately. On the other hand, in the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the quality of beauty was what predominated in their characters. So given this contrast in their characters, the immediate sense of awe when confronted Umar radiallahu anhu is not surprising. कि दोनों में अलग था. तो आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के अंदर फजीलत थी, मगर उनमें जो नरमी थी, और उमर को देख के लोग फौरन डर जाते थे. तो फिर इसमें वो नहीं कि शैतान भी इस तरह करके डर जाता. So this is the explanation that he gave, that because of these different qualities people had, so it doesn't mean that if shaitan did run away from the path of Umar radiallahu anhu, then Umar radiallahu anhu has a bigger status, or na'udhu billah, it's a fake story, or if it happened to him, why not with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, why not with the Prophet, because they are more virtuous, or shaitan not scared of them and scared of him. So that's not the question behind it. The question itself is wrong, that it's about the characteristic of a person. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the understanding of the deen, the way these ulama, Mashaikh, they understood the deen from inside out. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill the graves of our kabireen with nur, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten us and give us some part of their wisdom and understanding of the deen. Jazakallah khair.